Why, hello there, it is 15 days until Elden Ring comes out on February 25th, 2022, and this is the Elden Week Countdown. Today a bunch of Elden Ring information exploded onto the internet as press outlets and a few creators an embargo lifted where they could talk about 6 hours that they got with Elden Ring, similar to Game Informer where they were relatively free to roam where they wanted during the 6 hours, with some restrictions put on, and they've all released content where Fromsoftware provided B-roll for capture, so there's a little bit of new gameplay footage but not a ton, and they are free to give their impressions of their 6 hours with the game. If you want to check out a less spoilery version of that, I hear that Vadi video is relatively light and sticks mostly to the starting area Limgrave, whereas if you want to go deep and just get tons of spoilers, you can check out all of it, but if you're looking for one in particular, I hear that Fextra Life laid everything out. But what I am talking about today is relatively spoiler-free. It is an interview on the site GameBraves with Yasuhiro Kitao, where they're talking about some of their responses to the network test, as well as the current state of the online gameplay as Fromsoftware is responding to the RCE exploit that came to light earlier this year. Let's get into it. So the first thing that Kitao addressed was a common piece of feedback and a topic I heard plenty during the closed network test, and that is the design of the HUD. Kitao says, "We did plan to make adjustments to the HUD, but of course after seeing feedback from the network test it was clear that the current designs were far too simple and far too basic. We needed something that would match better with the world and the setting, and something that would be more appealing to the eye, so we're grateful for this feedback from the players." Fromsoftware generally makes an 11th hour change to their UI, so I wasn't expecting it to be final, but from the recent accounts, the HUD feels more appropriate to the themes of the game while also being just as readable. And the next thing that came up in the interview is that Kitao mentioned that there have been adjustments made to the balance of combat from what we played in the closed network test. Kitao said, "So in the final game you'll see that melee, magic, and other types of projectile weapons have been tuned, hopefully to be more balanced across the board, as well as things on the enemy sides, such as enemy reactions and motions in response to your attacks, things like this which also make it easier to read the situation and adapt accordingly." And Kitao goes on to explain the process a bit by saying, "There are an awful lot of types of equipment to cater with, different play styles, and we literally have to address each piece of weaponry one by one. Is there something that is too strong? So we have to check the parameters, animations, the timings, and see what can be changed. It could be a case of tweaking some numbers, other times it is more complicated." None of this is surprising. It was one of the major goals of the closed network test to see the balance with a larger player base, but if you played the closed network test or watched footage from it and felt that something was a bit off, it probably was to a degree and will likely be a bit different in the final release. And next, Kitao said there's going to be a lot more variety there, so players would have a lot more freedom to experiment in that sense. Also, there are many different items in the game, some which utilize magic as well, so players might want to branch out from their comfort zone and try different things to combat the situation differently. We think this is a new trend we might see in Elden Ring. And with the Elden Ring Twitter account posting up the starting classes in their tweets on Tuesdays and Fridays, we have seen a lot of discussions lately about the starting builds, and I've seen across the board that hybrid builds seem to be a pretty popular choice, and that seems to be by design according to what Kitao has said. So I'm not going to hold myself to anything during my blind playthrough, but Strength and Faith does sound very appealing to me right now. What build do you think you might want to tackle for your first foray into the Lands Between? Let me know in the comments. And the next topic that Kitao talked about was Margit, the Fell Omen, and his balance. Kitao said, "We didn't want to set out to make bosses harder for the sake of it. Margit was just too hard for the network test, we believe. He was just a bit tweaked on the high end, so he does need some balancing for that early point in the game." And Kitao goes on to say, in terms of bosses that are unessential and optional and hidden, there are some of these that we have deliberately increased the challenge for those players who want to seek out this kind of experience. Hopefully if you're that way inclined, you can seek out some really tough challenges hidden away in the world. I think this makes sense, and I like this direction, which is really no different from what they typically do. Margit does have an impressive array of moves for an early boss with aggression to match, so I trust FromSoft's judgment here. More importantly, it really does sound like they've made some optional content absolutely punishing this time around, and I can't wait to find out what dark secrets await us. And then moving on to a bit of news that's a little bit of a bummer for me, Kitao said that there will not be a boss rush or boss rematch mode in Elden Ring, and that they're not currently planning on one. With Elden Ring as a culmination of a decade of Souls games, I was hoping maybe we would see the return of the bonfire aesthetic, but alas, it does not seem to be the case. And with a world as broad as Elden Ring, I don't think it is a big loss. And then rounding out the interview, Kitao addressed the state of Elden Ring multiplayer in light of the RCE exploit. Kitao said, "We want players to rest assured that the issue has been addressed with regard to Elden Ring's release. And this is not going to be an issue when the game launches at the end of the month." He went on to say that for the Dark Souls series, they do need some extra time to set up and address the issue. And overall, I think this is great news. I'm happy to hear that multiplayer will be fully intact for the release of Elden Ring, because that is such a magical and exciting thing to have all these new players in. There's no meta in PvP, plenty of co-op and activity and bloodstains and messages, and it's just a really good time. So I'm very happy to find that it will be intact for the release. And there you have it, day 15. A ton of new information is out. We are so close to the end that I just don't want to absorb all of it. There's plenty of other places to find it if you are disappointed in me not covering it, but I think a lot of people are sort of on board where we're just peeking in and seeing some minor things, but mostly we want to preserve the experience for the full release, which is coming up so soon. But this interview was cool, and I'm glad that there was something that I could talk about today and just get some updates, and it's good to see sort of some insight into how FromSoftware responded to the closed network test and to see what changes they really made because of it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like, and if you want more item descriptions getting covered, any more interviews that may out getting covered before the release of Elden Ring, and then you want a ton of design content, lore content, and all that good stuff after the release of Elden Ring, please consider subscribing to the Lore Hunter. Thanks for watching.